My name is Chloe Bennett, and I am 23 years old. 3 weeks ago, I walked across a stage at Hartwell University in front of 2,000 people and delivered the commencement address as the top graduating scholar in the entire college. My parents were sitting in the third row. They had driven 4 hours to watch my twin sister, Madison, graduate. They had no idea I was even enrolled there, and they absolutely had no idea that their daughter, the one they called a waste of potential, was about to speak into a microphone in front of everyone they knew. But let me take you back to where this really started, because the stage moment is not the story. The story starts in our kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, on a Wednesday evening in April, 4 years ago, when my father put down his coffee mug, looked me dead in the eye, and said something I will carry for the rest of my life. It was the night the acceptance letters came. Madison got into Hartwell, a private university with a reputation and a price tag to match, around $60,000 a year. I got into Maplewood State, a solid school, $30,000 a year. Still a stretch, but manageable with help. Dad called us both into the kitchen after dinner. He had that look on his face, the one he wore when he had already made a decision and was just performing the conversation for appearances. He told Madison her full tuition, housing, and meal plan were covered. Mom smiled like they had just announced a wedding. Madison shrieked and hugged them both. Then Dad turned to me and said, "Chloe, we are not going to be able to do the same for you." I asked why. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Madison is the investment. She has the personality, the drive, the network. You are smart, but smart is not enough. There is no clear return with you." I looked at my mother. She looked at the table. I looked at Madison. She was already texting. I did not cry that night. I had spent 16 years learning that crying in that house only made things worse. Instead, I went to my room, sat on the floor, and started doing math. If you have ever been made to feel invisible by the people who were supposed to see you clearest, type something in the comments right now, because you are not alone in this. And if this story is already hitting close to home, hit the like button. It genuinely helps more than you know. The favoritism in our house was not subtle. When we turned 16, Madison got a brand new car. I got a secondhand laptop with a battery that lasted 40 minutes. When Madison wanted to study abroad in her junior year of high school, my parents found the money. When I asked to join a debate program that cost $200, Dad said we needed to be practical. Every family photo had Madison at the center. I was always at the edge, sometimes half out of frame, like an afterthought that the camera could not quite commit to. A few months before the college decision, I found something I was not supposed to see. Mom had left her email open on the family computer. There was a thread with her sister. I should not have read it, but I did. Mom had written, "Harold is right about Chloe. She does not have that spark. We have to be strategic with what we have." I closed the tab, walked to my room, and made a decision I told nobody. I opened that broken laptop and searched for every scholarship available to independent and first-generation students. I stayed up until 2 in the morning, reading eligibility requirements, deadlines, and award amounts. That night I found 2 things that changed everything. Maplewood State had a full merit scholarship for students with financial need and academic excellence, only 8 awarded per year, and buried in a database, I found something called the Caldwell National Scholarship, a full ride plus a living stipend, awarded to 25 students across the entire country, with one additional benefit I did not fully understand until later. The math was brutal. Maplewood cost $30,000 a year. My summer job savings totaled $1,800. The gap was enormous. So I built a plan that most people would have walked away from. I took 3 jobs my first year. Early morning barista shifts, weekend housekeeping at a hotel near campus, and a tutoring position through the economics department. I found the cheapest shared housing available, a room in a 4-person house 12 minutes from campus. No air conditioning, 1 bathroom, paper-thin walls. I slept 4 to 5 hours a night. I ate a lot of rice and canned soup, and I applied for every scholarship I could find. What kept me going was not anger. It was something quieter. Every morning before my shift, I would remind myself, this is the cost of belonging to yourself. Freshman Thanksgiving, I called home. The background noise was loud, family, laughter, the sound of a full house. Dad said he was busy when I asked to speak to him. Mom's voice was bright and hollow at the same time. That night, I saw Madison's Instagram post, the whole family at the dining table. Candles, a full spread, everyone smiling. 3 chairs. Not 4. 3. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I put my phone down and went back to studying. Second semester, I took an economics course with a professor named Dr. Patricia Ellis. She had a reputation for being impossible to impress. My first paper came back with an A and a note that said, "Come see me." I assumed I had done something wrong. When I sat across from her, she told me it was the strongest undergraduate writing she had read in 15 years. She asked about my background. I told her everything. The decision, the 3 jobs, the 4 hours of sleep, my parents' exact words about return on investment. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. "Have you heard of the Caldwell Scholarship?" The next 2 years were the hardest and most clarifying of my life. I kept a 4.0 GPA across 6 semesters. I fainted once during a morning shift from exhaustion and was back at work the next day. I missed every social event, every road trip, every late Friday night that my roommates talked about for weeks after. I was not building memories. I was building a foundation. Junior year, Dr. Ellis called me in. She said she was nominating me for the Caldwell. I stared at her. She said it would require 10 essays, 3 interview rounds, a background review, and reference letters from 3 faculty members. I said I would start that night. I did somewhere in the middle of the application process. Madison texted me for the first time in months. "Mom says you never come home anymore. That is kind of sad." I read it, turned my phone over, and kept writing. The Caldwell acceptance email arrived on a Tuesday morning in October of my senior year. I was walking to class when my phone buzzed. "Dear Ms. Bennett, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a Caldwell Scholar for the class of 2025. I stopped walking. A man on a bicycle swerved around me and said something I did not hear. I sat down on the curb outside the campus coffee shop and cried in a way I had not allowed myself to cry in years. Dr. Ellis called me that evening. She said there was something she had not mentioned. The Caldwell Scholarship included transfer eligibility to any partner university for the final year of study. Hartwell University was on the list. Madison School. If I transferred, I would graduate as valedictorian, and the Caldwell Scholar delivered the commencement address at graduation. I transferred. I told no one in my family. Here is where it gets interesting. Stay with me. 8 weeks into my final semester at Hartwell, I was studying on the 4th floor of the library when I heard footsteps stop next to my table. I looked up. Madison was standing there holding a coffee, her mouth open, words not forming. I closed my book and said, "Hi, Madison." She said, "What are you? How are you? Since when?" I said, "Since September." She said, "Mom and Dad do not know." I said, "No, they do not." She asked how I was paying for it. I said, "Scholarship." The word sat between us like something heavy. She looked at me for a long moment and then said, "Why did you not tell anyone?" I looked back at her and said, "Did anyone ever ask?" She called my parents that night. According to her, my father went silent for 10 seconds and then said, "That is impossible. She is not scholarship material." She told him she had seen me herself. He said he would handle it. He called me the next morning, first time in 3 years. He said, "Victoria says you are at Hartwell." I said, "Chloe." He said, "What?" I said, "My name is Chloe." He paused. He said, "We need to talk about this." I said, "There is nothing to talk about. You said I was not worth the investment. I invested in myself." He said, "We should discuss it at graduation." I said, "I will see you there," and I hung up. Graduation morning was clear and warm. 2,000 seats, almost all filled by 9. I arrived through the faculty entrance. My gown was standard black, but across my shoulders was the gold honor sash of the valedictorian. The Caldwell medallion was pinned at my chest. I found my seat in the honors section at the front of the stage. 20 feet away in the general graduate section, Madison was taking photos with friends, not yet seeing me, and in the front row center, my parents sat with a bouquet of roses, a camera, and an empty chair between them. Not for me. For Coates, the university president took the podium. He spoke about the class, about the year, about the future. Then he said, "It is my honor to introduce this year's valedictorian and Caldwell Scholar, a student whose story represents everything this institution stands for. Please welcome Chloe Bennett." I stood up. 2,000 eyes turned. I walked to the podium, heels steady on the stage floor. I watched my father's hand freeze on his camera, my mother's roses tilted sideways. Madison's jaw dropped from across the field. They had come to watch her graduation. Instead, they were watching me step into the spotlight they never thought I deserved. I leaned into the microphone. "Good morning." 4 years ago, I was told I was not worth the investment. I heard my mother make a sound in the front row. I kept going. I spoke about the barista shifts and the 4 hours of sleep. I spoke about eating soup from a can and borrowing textbooks from the library. I spoke about what it means to build your life entirely from scratch, not because someone believed in you, but because you finally decided to believe in yourself. I did not name anyone. I did not need to. I said, "To anyone who has ever been told you are not enough, you were lied to." And the applause that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. At the reception, my parents found me. Dad's voice was rough. He said, "Why did you not tell us?" I said, "Would it have changed anything?" He did not answer. Mom reached for me and I stepped back gently. I told them I was not angry. I meant it. But I also told them that love without action is just a word, and they had given me a lot of words. I started a job in Chicago 2 weeks later. I have been promoted once already. Dr. Ellis calls to check in. My best friend from college flew in for my first weekend in the new apartment and declared it small and perfect. Madison and I are figuring out what sisters can look like when you build it from honesty instead of history. It is slow. It is real. Dad called 6 weeks after graduation. He said he had been trying to figure out what to say and kept coming up empty. I told him to just say what was true. He said, "I was wrong. I was wrong about everything." His voice cracked. I told him I heard him. I told him I was not promising anything, but if he wanted to have an honest conversation, I would pick up the phone. He said that was more than he deserved. I said, "Yes, it is." I wrote a check last month to the Maplewood State Scholarship Fund. $10,000 for students without family financial support. Anonymous. If you are watching this and you have ever been counted out by someone who was supposed to count you in, I want you to hear this clearly. Their judgment was never the truth about you. It was only ever the truth about them. You do not need their validation to begin. You only need yours. Say it out loud right now. I am enough. Mean it. Then go prove it to yourself, not to them, to yourself. If this story hit you somewhere real, share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, because the next story is even more intense. Drop in the comments which parts stayed with you. I read every single one.